Hey everybody, I'm Jeff Schneider, and in today's video, we're going to talk about how much you should be practicing. Of course, there's no magic number. There's no secret to this. It's not like you need to practice 4 hours a day or 8 hours a day or 1 hour a day. There's no set number you can put on it. But what I'm going to talk about today is how to determine what might be the appropriate amount for you. Now, the first thing that we need to discuss is what your goals are, because your goals are really going to determine how much you should be practicing. It's just like a lifestyle when it comes to making a living, right? If you want to live in a huge house and have a fancy car and travel all over the world, and live in New York City or in San Francisco or London or some really expensive place to live, you need to make a certain amount of money in order to do that. So same goes for music. If you want to be, playing and touring all year round in the top clubs or the top shows or playing the top orchestras, whatever kind of music you're playing, that obviously is going to require a level of work that wouldn't be required of, say, somebody who's just playing as a hobby or wants to play some casual gigs on the weekends or just mess around with friends. That's the first thing you have to ask yourself. What are your goals? What do you want to be able to do with your music? One of the other considerations you have to make is how much talent you have. Now, the T word is something I kind of hate. It's sort of just this coverall term for, oh, you're really good at art or music or dance. Usually you hear this word in anything that's non-academic. You never hear anybody be like talented at math or science. I mean, there are other words that are similar to talent that are applied to those subjects, but I feel like talent is very much reserved for creative fields, which is not to say that math and science aren't creative fields, just sort of the traditional art fields is what I'm referring to here. Talent is a word that I feel like if you don't feel like you have talent, then you might not try to get to a certain level. I think it also lessens the amount of work one puts into whatever art form they're working on. So, say somebody's practicing, their entire life, as if it were a full-time job, like from 9 to 5, they're just practicing all day or more. And they do this for 10 years. And then, somebody hears them play and says, oh, you're so talented. I feel like that is sort of, it diminishes the amount of time and effort that went into getting to that level. So I don't like the word talent in that sense, and the sort of diminishing quality that it can have towards somebody's abilities. But at the same time, I do think that there are certain levels of innate skill or skill learned at a young age that then carries over into an age where maybe you are asking yourself, well, how much do I actually need to be practicing? If you are predisposed to be really, really good at something, you may not have to practice as hard as the guy or gal who is not as naturally able to do those things. Perfect pitch is a great example. Some people are, whether you're born with it or you learn it at a really, really young age, if you continue to have that skill of perfect pitch later on in life, you're going to have to practice ear training less than somebody who doesn't have perfect pitch. At a certain point, it doesn't matter. Here's a great example. And this comes from a teacher I had whose name was Charlie Banakis, the late, great Charlie Banakis. I'm sure some of you have heard of this guy. He was sort of one of the most legendary jazz teachers of all time. One of the famous exercises that he would give his students is this ear training exercise that's pretty popular these days, where you play a cadence in the key of C major or whatever, just sort of like a 1-4-5-1 chord progression to establish a tonic. And then he would play a random note and you would have to determine what it was. And once you got to that level, I've talked about this exercise on a previous YouTube video. I'm sure if you just look up my name and ear training, it's up there on YouTube somewhere. The exercise goes like this. He plays one note, you have to guess what it is. Once you get to the level where you can really easily determine what that one note is, the single note, one at a time, he then plays two notes at the same time. So you have to, work a little bit harder. And then you get to the next level of determining what three notes are at the same time. You have to be able to pick out each one of those notes until you get up to 11, 12 notes. And it's sort of just this like mass of sound that you have to pick apart and be able to determine what the individual notes are. Very challenging thing to do, obviously. Now, here's my point about talent and how it relates to that exercise. Charlie Banakis would say, we would talk about, well, people with perfect pitch might have an easier time with that exercise. However, once the person without perfect pitch gets to the same level of ability in that they can pick out 11 or 12 notes at one time, there's really no difference in the ability there. So yeah, it may take somebody a little bit longer to get to a certain place, but that doesn't mean anything once they're there. They're at the same level as the other person, and it's sort of like equal ground. So that's sort of a long answer to my own question there about is talent important? Well, the answer is it hasn't. It's worth considering, but I don't think it's important. I don't think it's going to limit anybody from getting to a certain level, because practicing can overcome any sort of limitations or lack of talent.